I'm 73 years old and I spent 45 years as a doctor. Here's something they don't tell you in medical school. Saving lives doesn't mean you're living yours. I know that sounds absurd coming from someone who took the Hippocratic Oath, who stood in operating rooms under fluorescent lights making life or death decisions, but it's the truth that took me until retirement to understand. For decades, I believed that my worth was measured in lives saved, in diagnoses caught early, in grateful patients and admiring colleagues. I was wrong about almost everything that mattered. I'm telling you this now because I see younger physicians making the same mistakes I did, and unlike the textbooks we studied, there's no protocol for recovering the years you've lost. When I made chief of surgery at 52, I thought I'd arrived. The hospital announced it in a staff meeting, and my colleagues stood and applauded. I had the corner office, the pick of surgical residents, the respect of every attending physician in the building. My operative mortality rates were among the lowest in the region. I performed complex cardiac procedures that other surgeons referred out. My name was on research papers. Medical students shadowed me, notebooks ready, trying to absorb whatever magic they thought I possessed. I remember standing in that office after everyone left, looking at my framed diplomas and certifications covering the walls, Johns Hopkins, board certifications, fellowship commendations, and feeling absolutely nothing. The leather chair was expensive. The view overlooked the hospital's healing garden, and I felt hollow. I was at the peak of everything I'd worked toward since I was 18 years old, and all I could think was, is this it? My pager went off. Another emergency. I grabbed my white coat and ran, grateful for the distraction from the question I couldn't answer. The catalyst came when I was 64, 18 months before my planned retirement. I was in the OR performing a triple bypass, something I'd done hundreds of times. My hands were steady. The resident assisting me was asking about graft placement. The anesthesiologist was managing the patient's vitals. Everything was routine until I looked up at the clock and saw it was 6:30 p.m. My daughter's wedding rehearsal dinner had started 30 minutes ago. I'd promised her, sworn to her, that nothing would keep me away this time, not after missing her high school graduation for an emergency appendectomy, not after missing her college graduation because I was presenting at a cardiology conference in Boston. I had promised. But there I was, wrist deep in someone's chest cavity, unable to leave, unable to do anything but finish the surgery. The patient needed me. The operation was critical. These were the justifications I'd used for 40 years, and they rang hollow even as I thought them. When I finally closed and got to the restaurant, still in my scrubs because I hadn't taken time to change, my daughter looked at me with this expression I'll never forget, not anger. That would have been easier. It was resignation. The look of someone who'd stopped expecting anything different. "Thanks for coming, Dad," she said. And those words contained every missed recital, every forgotten birthday, every broken promise of my career. I had dedicated 40 years to medicine and suddenly realized I'd done it at the expense of being a father, a husband, a human being with a life outside those hospital walls. The medical profession sells you a lie so seductive that you don't realize you've been conned until it's too late. The lie is this: you are indispensable. They tell you in residency that patients need you, that lives hang in the balance, that your dedication is what separates good doctors from great ones. They praise your willingness to work 80-hour weeks, to skip meals, to sacrifice sleep and family time and personal health for the sake of your patients. And you believe it because it makes you feel heroic, essential, like you're part of something larger than yourself. I climbed what I thought was the ladder to professional excellence, from intern to resident to attending to chief of surgery. Each rung required more hours, more dedication, more sacrifice. I gave up coaching my son's Little League team for fellowship requirements. I missed anniversaries for overnight call shifts. I canceled family vacations when surgical cases ran long. And at the top of that ladder, after reaching the pinnacle, I discovered I'd placed it against the wrong wall entirely. I'd climbed my way to professional success while abandoning everything that actually constituted a life worth living. My mentor, Dr. Richardson, was the physician I aspired to be. He was chief of surgery before me, renowned in cardiac surgery, published extensively, trained a generation of surgeons. When he died at 68, 2 years after retirement, the hospital held a memorial service. Hundreds of former patients and colleagues attended. Everyone spoke about his surgical brilliance, his contributions to the field, his dedication to medicine. His ex-wife didn't come. His 3 children sat in the back row, polite but distant. At the reception afterward, his oldest son told me, "He was a great surgeon. I just wish I'd known him as a father." Dr. Richardson had won every professional accolade our field offered, but died essentially alone. I looked at his children, strangers to their own father, and saw my future if nothing changed. But I was 62, already too deep into patterns carved over decades, and change felt impossible until that moment in the OR 2 years later made it imperative. I performed approximately 9,000 surgeries during my career, but couldn't repair the damage in my own marriage. I was named Physician of the Year 3 times, but missed my son's wedding because I was scheduled for a valve replacement that could have been rescheduled. I published 47 peer-reviewed articles on cardiovascular disease, but never had time to read the novel my wife wrote and self-published in her 50s. The metrics of my professional success are impressive on paper. Patient outcomes in the 95th percentile, 0 malpractice suits, letters of gratitude filling filing cabinets. But the personal accounting tells a different story. My first marriage ended when I was 45. My wife couldn't compete with the hospital anymore, and she was right not to try. I barely knew my children as people. I knew their medical histories, their vaccination schedules, but not their dreams or fears or the names of their friends. When my son was going through his divorce, he called his uncle for support, not me. Not because I wouldn't have helped, but because we simply didn't have that relationship. I'd been too busy saving other people's lives to be present in his. The professional regret I do have is minor. I wish I'd pursued that research grant for minimally invasive techniques, but that regret is trivial compared to the life regrets that keep me awake at night. I regret that my daughter learned to ride a bike with her grandfather, not me, because I was post-call and sleeping. I regret that when my mother was dying, I spent more time checking her vitals and consulting with her physicians than holding her hand. I regret that I know the anatomy of the human heart in exquisite detail, but never learned to speak the language of my own until it was almost too late. The irony is crushing. I counseled thousands of patients on lifestyle changes to prevent heart disease, reduce stress, spend time with family, find work-life balance, while ignoring every bit of that advice in my own life. I told a patient once that he was working himself into an early grave, then went straight from that appointment to a 14-hour surgical marathon. The hospital newsletter featured me as a model of dedication. My wife filed for divorce 6 months later. Retirement hit me like anesthetic, sudden, disorienting, total. For 45 years, I was Dr. Morrison, chief of cardiac surgery, the physician other physicians called for consults. Then on my 65th birthday, I was just Robert. Nobody paged me. Nobody needed me. Nobody's life depended on my hands or my knowledge. The hospital threw me a retirement party with a cake and speeches about my contributions to the institution. They gave me a plaque. Then I walked out of those doors for the last time, and the hospital continued without me. Surgeries happened, patients were treated, residents learned. The machine I thought couldn't function without me didn't even hiccup. That first year was brutal. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. out of habit, then remember I had nowhere to go. My hands, so steady in the OR, trembled when I tried to garden or cook because they were trained for one specific purpose. I didn't know who I was without a stethoscope around my neck. But slowly, painfully, I began to discover life outside medicine. I started attending my grandchildren's soccer games, every single one. I learned to paint, badly but joyfully. I volunteered at a literacy center teaching adults to read, which required patience and empathy in ways surgery never did. In my entire career, I saved thousands of lives. In retirement, I've learned how to actually live one. The precision that made me an exceptional surgeon made me a terrible husband. In the OR, there's no room for ambiguity. Every incision must be exact, every decision clear-cut. I brought that same rigidity home, trying to solve emotional problems with surgical thinking. Identify the issue, cut it out, close, move on. But life isn't a pathology you can diagnose and excise. Marriage requires messiness, vulnerability, the willingness to sit with uncertainty. I was trained to act decisively in crisis, but the real crises in my home weren't solved by action. They needed presence, listening, time I never had. The detachment that kept me functional during 12-hour surgeries, the ability to compartmentalize emotion and focus on the task, turned me into someone who couldn't connect with his own children. I could explain congenital heart defects to terrified parents with compassion and clarity, but I couldn't tell my own son that I was proud of him. The skills that elevated my career crippled my capacity for intimacy. To every doctor reading this, especially you, young attendings with decades ahead of you, you're not special. I know that sounds harsh from someone who spent his life in a profession that treats physicians like gods, but you're not indispensable. The hospital will replace you. Your patients will find other doctors. The research will continue without you. What won't continue is your child's childhood. You can't reschedule that. I know you think your situation is different, that your patients truly need you, that you'll make time for family after this rotation, after you make partner, after you finish fellowship. That's what I thought too. Every physician thinks they're the exception. We're trained to believe our work is uniquely important, that the stakes of medicine justify any personal sacrifice. But here's what nobody tells you in medical school. You will reach the end of your career, whether through retirement or death, and you will not regret the surgeries you didn't perform or the papers you didn't publish. You'll regret the moments you missed. You'll regret that your children's primary memories of you involve your absence. Do you know how many years the average physician lives after retirement? About 18. You're giving 40 plus years to medicine, and if you're lucky, you get 18 left to figure out who you are without it. Don't wait until then to start living. I'm 73 now, 8 years retired, and I'm happier than I was at any point in my career, including when I was being honored and celebrated and recognized. My days now are quieter but fuller. I have coffee with my son every Tuesday. I know my grandchildren's teachers' names. My current wife, we married 5 years ago, knows me as Robert, not Dr. Morrison. I volunteer at a free clinic 2 mornings a week, but I leave when my shift ends. I set boundaries I never knew existed during my career. Last month, my daughter asked me to watch her kids for a weekend, and I said yes immediately because my calendar had nothing but life on it. She cried. She actually cried because she was so surprised I was available. That broke something in me and healed something simultaneously. The medical community will remember me for my operative techniques, my research contributions, maybe a procedure or two that bears my name in some textbook. But what will my family remember? For too many years, they'd remember my absence, my broken promises, my prioritization of strangers over them. I'm trying now, in these remaining years, to build different memories, but I can't recover the time I lost. I can't redo my children's childhoods. I can't unmiss those milestones. The urgent case will always be there tomorrow. The patient who seems to need you specifically will survive with a different doctor, but your daughter's wedding happens once. Your son's championship game happens once. Your spouse's patience isn't infinite. How many more years do you think you have? How many more chances to show up? What will your profession remember you for? What will your family? The surgery you're so proud of, the one you chose over your child's birthday, In 5 years, no one will remember it except your child, who will remember you weren't there. That's the diagnosis no one wants to hear, but it's the one I'm giving you now, free of charge, from someone who learned it 40 years too late.